Is my audio working here?
Yeah, we
Yes,
got
sir.
you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. When we took our lunch break, we were right in the middle of talking about our kitchen countertop receptacles and those type of things. And we talked about the island and then the peninsula type countertops and some rules here that were written into the 2017 NEC 2018 IRC that are well, shoot, I don't know how else to put it. It's a work in progress. This needed some work. I don't think we got to where we wanted to get to with this requirement we're getting ready to talk about. Thankfully, it has been rectified or corrected for the next edition of the code, and we will take a look at that here just shortly. But what we have in code language for the 17 NEC 18 IRC, when it comes to an island or peninsula, now once again, you're going to take a measurement from, let me get my pointer, from this connecting edge right here out, and then a measurement this way. And if you come up with 12 or 24 inches or greater one way, 12 inches or greater the other way, you need a receptacle. But notice what it talks about in code language. This isn't my language, this is code language for the peninsula, where it says at least one receptacle outlet if we meet those measurement requirements is to be installed at each peninsula countertop long dimension space, where again we're greater than 24, greater than 12. So what the code's saying here is that the receptacle to serve the peninsula has to be located at the long dimension of this countertop. Now, we've got 4 sides to this thing. Where would you say is the long dimension? I would say it's right there or right there. And this would be the short dimension. Would you agree with that? So I don't think this was the intent of Code Making Panel 2 during the 17 code revision cycle, but the language we ended up with, if I put a receptacle at the end of this peninsula right here, nothing says it can't be there, but a receptacle located right there could not serve as the required receptacle for this peninsula. In order for me to satisfy this rule under the 17 code 18 IRC, it has to be located where? At the long dimension of this space right here. So it would either have to be located right here or right here to satisfy this rule. And once again, I don't think this was the intent or where we were trying to get to, but that's what we have in the language that we're dealing with currently. So, and again, this has been corrected for the next edition of the code that we'll take a look at here in just one second. We talked about this one where, you know, I take my measurement and I come up with 12 and 24 or greater, need one receptacle. But if I put something out here in the middle that has the ability to break up the counter space, then what I've actually done is now created 2 separate spaces. And if I come up with 24 or greater, 12 or greater here, 24 or greater, 12 or greater here, then I'm going to need a receptacle here and a receptacle here to satisfy this requirement. Now, same thing with an island. If I have something out in the middle of that island, like a range top or something that breaks up this counter space, in other words, I don't have I have less than 12 inches right here, then the code would see that as two separate counter spaces. And if I come up with 24 and 12 or greater here, 24 and 12 or greater here, I would be required to have two receptacle outlets. And here's the change I was talking about when you get to the next edition of the code. And Code Making Panel 2, who's responsible for Article 210 in the National Electrical Code, they got quite a few public inputs, and they even discussed it amongst themselves. You know, have we reached the point in time to where perhaps it's time that we put some code language in place that would demand more than one receptacle for something like that 8.5 foot long, 2 foot wide peninsula like we talked about before lunch? Whereas, the 17 code 18 IRC would only require one receptacle. Perhaps it's time we put language in place that would demand more than one receptacle for these larger countertops that we're starting to see, particularly islands and peninsulas, in especially the higher end type dwelling units. So, and the answer to that came back, yes, it is time. So when you get to the 2021 IRC, 2020 NEC, you will no longer take a linear measurement of an island or a peninsula. Now, your base countertops are just the same. No point any further than 24 inches, any countertop wider than 12 inches, and so on. But for your islands and peninsulas, you will no longer take a linear measurement across the countertop. What you'll do is figure up the square footage of the countertop itself. And the first 9 square feet of counter space will demand one receptacle. Now, that phrase right there, that term right there, or fraction thereof, is the key to understanding this new provision when you get to the next edition of the code. What that means is, if I have a island or a peninsula that measures 9 square feet, I'm required how many receptacles? 1. If that island or peninsula measures 9 square feet and 1 inch, how many receptacles are required? 2. Fraction thereof. That's the key to understanding this. So the first 9 square feet calls for a receptacle outlet. And by the way, the language used here is receptacle outlet. Now, if you look at the definition of receptacle and receptacle outlet in Article 100 of the NEC, or Chapter 35 of the IRC, let me just read it to you because I get this question sometimes. I get asked the question sometimes, if I need 2 receptacles, can I put a duplex receptacle outlet or a duplex receptacle and satisfy this rule? And the answer to that is no. Because what's called for here in this language here is receptacle outlets. Now look at the definition of receptacle: a contact device installed at the outlet for the connection of attachment plugs or for the direct connection of electrical utilization equipment, and so on. Now, the definition of a receptacle outlet says an outlet where 1 or more receptacles are installed. And that's what's being called for here, is a receptacle outlet. So it wouldn't matter if you put a duplex or even a quadruplex, 4 receptacles, the code would see that as 1 receptacle outlet. And so the first 9 square feet would call for a receptacle. The next 18 square feet will call for another receptacle, and the next 18 and the next 18, and so on. So, and again, or fraction thereof. So in this example we've got on the screen right here, it looks like we've got an island that's 7 by 4 feet, which would be what, 28 square feet. So the first 9 square feet would call for what? One receptacle. The next 18 square feet would call for a receptacle. That would be what, 27 square feet? And fraction thereof would call for another receptacle. So for this 28 square foot island right here, it's going to take what? At least 3 receptacle outlets to satisfy this rule. Now, there's also language here that says as far as the location of those receptacle outlets, it can be up to the designer building owner to determine the location. Per code, if you wanted to put a receptacle outlet right there, another one right there, and another one right there, you'd satisfy this rule. Now, I don't know why you would want to bunch those up like that. The homeowner would probably kill you if you did that, but there was language added so that you could not have to try to put a receptacle in the front of a cabinet door or something like that. The code tells us how many receptacle outlets are required. The location of those receptacle outlets can be determined by the designer, building owner, etc. Okay. Same thing with a peninsula. I'm going to determine my square footage, and the first 9 square feet would call for a receptacle, and the next 18 square feet or fraction thereof would call for another receptacle. And that language we just got through looking at saying that it had to be located at the long dimension is gone, thank goodness. So yes, I could locate a receptacle at the end of that countertop, which most people would do, and satisfy my code rule. Now there is some language here that's a little bit different on the peninsulas than it is the islands, because it says what here? At least one receptacle outlet has to be installed within 2 feet of the outer end of the peninsula. So I could locate one right here or within 2 feet of the end and be code compliant right here. Somebody brought this up before lunch, and this is the code rule that was being discussed, is that you can't locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than 6 inches and have that receptacle serve that particular countertop. There's nothing in the code that says a receptacle can't be located under a overhang of 6 inches. It's just that that receptacle cannot be the receptacle that is intended to serve that particular countertop. What you're trying to do right here, guys, is prevent a lot of exposed cord. If I had a coffee maker or Fry Daddy or something sitting up here, you wouldn't want a lot of exposed cord right here to where a small child could come along and grab that cord and, pull the appliance over on top of them or something. Now you're going to have some exposed cord right here, but you're not going to have near like you would right here. And that's the reason that rule is in the code. So, and also, by the way, I could utilize the bottom of the upper cabinets with some plug mode or something if I chose to do that to serve these countertops, as long as those receptacles right there were within 20 inches of the countertop it was intended to serve. And most of your upper cabinets are what, 17, 18 inches above those countertops. So yes, you could use, you've got a bunch of quartz backsplashes that the homeowner just doesn't want to cut some receptacles into or something, you could use that. Now, isn't that funny? We spent $20,000 on quartz countertops, and now we're going to put $298 strip mold up there to meet my code rules. So yeah, but the code permits that. I'm going to, under the 17 code 18 IRC, what am I going to do? I'm going to take a measurement right there first and see if that's less than 12, which it looks like it's not. Then I'm going to take a measurement this way and that way. And if I come up with 24 inches or greater this way, 12 inches or greater this way, then that means I have to have a receptacle, one, to serve this countertop. And there it is, under less than a 6-inch overhang. Now you see this one right here, and it's under a overhang of greater than 6 inches, but it's not a receptacle intended to serve this countertop. That receptacle is there to serve as wall space for the dining room or whatever that is on the other side over here. So that satisfies my rule for a receptacle to serve this particular countertop. Now, if we were to build this house under the 2020 NEC, 2021 IRC, rather than take this linear measurement, we would take a square footage, right? Now we would exclude this sink. So we would take the square footage of, like this, and this. And if we came up with 9 square feet and 1 inch or more, we would need this receptacle right here, and we would need another receptacle over here, which, by the way, there is another receptacle on the other side of that over there that you can't see, but there is one over there. Greater than 12 inches right there, looks like to me. Measure 24 or greater here, 12 or greater here. I need a receptacle, and there it is. Again, you see a receptacle that is under an overhang of greater than 6 inches, but that receptacle right there is not intended to serve this countertop. Matter of fact, it couldn't serve this countertop even if I intended it to, because why? It's not within 12 inches of the countertop it's intended to serve. So, and if I were under the 20 code 2021 IRC, I would take a square footage and gosh, let's just guess what, 3 feet by 7 feet, 21 square feet. Take out that sink, we're at 19 square feet or something. That would call for how many? 2 receptacles. The receptacle outlets, one right there and another one over here on the other side, something like that, and that would satisfy this requirement. In recent years, we have seen the innovation of pop-up type receptacles, and the code recognizes those. Matter of fact, the code language here used to say receptacle outlets. In order for it to serve a countertop, it had to be installed above the countertops. And now to qualify something like this right here, the code was changed to on or above the countertops. We still can't put them in the face-up position, but we are permitted to utilize something like that right there. These are a pretty nifty invention. I don't know if you've seen any of these out in your travels, but this thing works off of hydraulics. You just, when it's in the closed position, you just come and, push the top of it, and it hydraulically rises out of the countertop. And the same thing when you go to close it, just push on the top of it, and it hydraulically lowers down into the countertop. These things have passed every UL spill test that it's required to go through. In other words, there's a gasket right here that even if you spilt a drink or something right here, that gasket would prohibit that liquid from entering that cylinder right here. And when you go to close this thing, there's actually some contact points down here. And when you go to close it, those contact points break apart and that receptacle is de-energized until it's in the fully upright position. So it's a pretty neat little invention that somebody's come up with here. Here you see one in action right here. And that can perfectly serve as the required receptacle for these countertops. This was a photograph that was sent to me by a student in one of the classes, and I'll never forget it. The title of his email was in big capital letters, "Help," with exclamation marks behind it. And he sent me this photograph, and he said he'd been in one of my classes, and he said, "I know the code says that I cannot locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than 6 inches and have it serve this countertop. Well, I've got a greater than 6-inch overhang all the way around this thing. So what do I do?" In other words, that's a code violation right there. Under an overhang of greater than 6 inches and trying to have that receptacle serve this countertop. The answer here was, actually, this is really not an electrical issue. This is a design issue right here. My recommendation, and by the way, the guy that sent me this was an AHJ. I would have given him different advice had he not been an AHJ. But I simply told him, you need to go to the builder and say, "Mr. Builder, I cannot locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than 6 inches. You've got a 6-inch overhang all the way around this thing. I have to have a receptacle to serve this countertop. When you get that fixed, call me." And he wasn't as smart aleck as I was, but what they actually did here was they took this countertop, just took it off and set it over to the side, and then they rebuilt this cabinet to where on each end here and down here you only had an overhang of 1.5 inches or so. In other words, they expanded those cabinets. The homeowner gained more cabinet space by the AHJ doing his job. And they ended up locating the receptacle right here under that 1.5 inch overhang and satisfied this rule. Now, I guess they could. Now, this is a track home. You can pretty well tell this is a track home, but I guess they could have done that, right? That probably is a little bit more expensive than what they were wanting to spend on that track home. So the solution was rebuild this cabinets to where you don't have an overhang but 1.5 inches right here.
What about right there in the corner where it's making the turn? Could it be right there?
No, that was greater than 6 inches again.
Okay, you can't really see it from here.
Right. Okay. With this two-dimension photograph, it's hard to tell, but I'm telling you, there was a greater than 6 inches all the way around this thing.
Okay.
It was about, I would guess that it was probably about 7 inches right there from that point to, right here, about 7 inches.
Okay. Thank you.
And let's say that this was 5 inches. Where would you put the receptacle? I don't remember. Right here? Then it would be under this overhang of greater than 6 inches. If you tried to put it right here, it would be under an overhang of greater than 6 inches right here. So
even it's a determination you gotta make. If it's half and half, I guess it's the AHG.
You're making up code rules.
Yeah.
It's gonna be you would measure it from the face of that receptacle outlet to the edge of that countertop right there. I've had people, I'll go back a little bit. I've had people argue with me that you can locate a receptacle right there and be code compliant, and I don't think so. I think that you're right there, you're under an overhang of greater than 6 inches. Right here,
well, you're
under an overhang of 1/2 inch.
Well, I've been dealing with master electrician. They're actually calling that good. That's what I'm saying. It's not me, but this is our master electrician that's actually doing that call.
Those master electricians have just as much right to be wrong as the next guy, and in this case, they are. Okay.
Okay. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. This was an interesting photo. I took this photograph probably 7, 8 years ago. And again, this is a 2-dimension photograph and it's hard to see, but you can actually walk all the way around this thing. Okay. So it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck. It's usually a duck, right? So it looks like an island, acts like an island, but guess what? This is not an island really because of what? This backsplash right here. Now under the 17 code 18 IRC, the code tells me that there's only 2 provisions that will allow me to put a receptacle under a countertop or below a countertop and have that receptacle serve that countertop. And those 2 conditions are if the house is being built for someone that is physically impaired. And since I don't have that documentation, I'm going to assume that this house was not built for someone that is physically impaired. And the other condition that would allow me to put this receptacle right here below this countertop is if I have no backsplash. Do I have a backsplash here? Everybody shake your head, yes. Now on the rough end, when there was a piece of wire stuck up, rolled up out here, okay, I'm gonna have an island. But then when you get to the final, not only do you have a quote unquote island, that island has a backsplash. And so once that backsplash appeared, what else just kicked back in? You're no point any further than 24 inches from a receptacle just kicked back in. In other words, these are base countertops now. And so that's a code violation. And to make this code compliant, again, I took this photograph and also measured that right there. And from right there to right there, that measured 54.5 inches. So what does that mean? To make this code compliant, you'd need at least 2 receptacle outlets up here, wouldn't you? Because if you tried to put one right in the middle, you're greater than 24 inches to this point and that point. So if I scoot it over to where I'm less than 24 inches to that point, then now I'm 40 inches to that point. So it would actually take 2 receptacle outlets up here to make this code compliant under the 20 code 17 NEC 18 IRC. Now under the 20 code 2021 IRC, we're going to do what? We're going to just simply get a square footage right here, which would probably call for 2 receptacles as well. And that language talking about the physically impaired or if you have backsplashes, you can't have it under the countertop. That language is not there in the 20 code and the 2021 code. And the reason I showed you these last 3 or 4 photographs is just simply to say that yes, I realize that everything you guys see on an everyday basis doesn't fit into a cookie cutter code compliant requirement. But if you step back and apply your code rules, I still think you can make all of these code compliant. Go ahead.
Kid, question. If you already comply with those receptacles, in this case, 2 receptacles added to the top, can you just leave that one there or do you have to eliminate it?
Eliminate it.
I don't think you would have to eliminate it because the code just says that that receptacle can't serve as a required receptacle to serve that countertop.
But you know what's going to happen? They're still going to use it.
Okay.
That's why I asked.
I don't think there's a rule in the code that says thou shalt not put this receptacle right here. It just says if I have a backsplash, I can't locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than or
Right.
under or below the countertop.
So there's nothing telling you to eliminate that one then? That's what you're saying?
I don't think so. I mean, if you wanted to be consistent and you wanted to actually enforce, well, that's another thing. Are you trying to enforce? Who's asking the question? Francisco?
Yes,
Are you
I
trying
am.
to enforce the electrical code? Are you trying to enforce Francisco's code?
Electrical
And
code.
okay, if you're trying to enforce the electrical code, you can't. You just got to go what's in black and white there. And I don't think there's anything that would just say you can't put that there. Now, Francisco's code or Keith's code might say that, but we're not enforcing Keith's code, are we?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
What about that prior slide?
What about what?
The prior slide that you had that showed that outlet, did you have to delete that one? Where the overhang was more than 6 inches all the way around the island?
Again, I don't think you would have. Now, they did delete it because they rebuilt that cabinet. And it was just as convenient to get rid of it as leave it. But I don't think there's anything that I could. Now, if I were the AHJ, guess what? I would try to make them get rid of that receptacle because Francisco said it correctly. If you leave it there, guess what? They're going to use it.
Yeah, they are going to use it.
And this one's under a overhang of greater than 6 inches, whereas the one we looked at was not under an overhang of greater than 6 inches. So you're actually posing a hazard here with that exposed cord.
Yep.
But again, the code doesn't say you cannot locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than 6 inches. The code says you can't locate a receptacle under an overhang of greater than 6 inches and have that receptacle serve as the required receptacle to serve that countertop. That's what the code says. So yeah, again, if I were the AHJ, I would try every trick I knew to try to get that receptacle removed, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure I could find code language that would back me up there.
Yeah, Keith, can I jump in on that for a sec?
Sure, sure.
So along these lines, I dealt with this one on some high-rise construction. So we're talking about this condition times 300. And what we did, because the code does not say it can't be there, but we had the 10-inch overhang. We had them put the receptacles in per the code. And those, obviously, they didn't want to remove those because of the costs associated with it. So we urged them, since the unsafe condition would still exist.
That was a great word you used, urged.
Yeah, we urged them and pleaded with them to change that receptacle, that outlet, and turn it into a low voltage USB port for like a cell phone charger, because we felt that, you know, a kid pulling on a cell phone charger, hitting the head with a cell phone was a lot better than getting in the head with a coffee maker.
Yeah.
And it worked out really good.
Hot coffee and all. Yeah. Good solution. Now, having said everything we've talked about over the last 5 minutes or so, sometimes I get, not sometimes, a lot of times I get questions about the code called in or emailed to me. And a lot of times the emails concern my inspector is making me put a receptacle every 18 inches along the countertop. And, you know, where's he getting that at, or is he correct or something? And of course, my response back is simply, here's what the National Electrical Code says. Okay. But then I always add at the end, but I'm not the AHJ. The AHJ has the final say so. And then again, I'm a smart aleck, so you got to know that. So, but then I'll add at the very end, if your AHJ is telling you that you need to paint all your conduit pink, your next move is to go to the supply house and get you some pink paint. Okay. So if you're the ASJ and say that receptacle's got to be removed, then go for it. But if somebody calls your hand on it, I'm not sure you'd have code behind you to say, this is why we're telling you to do this. Okay. Okay, let's talk about bathroom receptacles. We got to have a receptacle within 36 inches of the outside of each basin. I've got two basins right here in this illustration, so I could put a receptacle right here and right here, and as long as those were within 36 inches, I'm good to go. I could also put a receptacle right here, and if that receptacle was within 36 inches of both those basins, without these two even being here, that would be code compliant. Now, the problem right here is that receptacle is probably going to be located in a mirror. And boy, the builders just hate putting those receptacles in a mirror like that, don't they? You know, they have to, first of all, cut the mirror, and then they have to shore the mirror up and so on. And matter of fact, I had a builder call me one time and say, boy, Keith, I need you to explain something to me about your code. He kept calling it my code, like I write the thing. And he says, your code says that I need a receptacle within 36 inches of the outside of each basin. And I said, well, yeah, that's correct. And he said, this is the inside and this is the outside right here. And I said, no, that drain right there is the inside and that's the outside of that basin right there. He didn't like that interpretation, but that's how you look at that. Now, again, cute, clean, pretty little illustrations and pictures and everything's lovely. Let's kiss and hug and dance around the merry-go-round. This is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? This is where you have to apply these rules. You got wires and 2x4s going everywhere. But still, it's very apparent to me on the rough end here that I'm going to have two basins in this bathroom. The electrician chose to put a receptacle right here that I think is going to easily fall within 36 inches of both those basins once we get to the final. That would be code compliant. Electrician also put me a receptacle over here, which is above the minimum standards of the code. Thank you, Mr. Electrician. I don't see that very often. But that would be code compliant. The code tells us that those receptacle outlets outlet has to be, again, located within 36 inches of the outside of each basin. And it has to be located either on a wall or a partition adjacent to the basin. So it could be right there. It could be right there on that wall. It could be right there on that partition right there. The code even allows me to use the front or the face of that countertop to locate those receptacles if I choose to do that. Now, if you put receptacles below the countertop, the only thing the code says here for the bathroom receptacles is these receptacles have to be located within 12 inches of the countertop it's intended to serve. But those, and as long as these are within 36 inches of the outside of these basins, we're good. That receptacle right there. Now, it's got to be within 36 inches of that basin right there. And it has to be within 12 inches of the countertop it's intended to serve. How am I going to take that measurement from that receptacle to that basin right there? I always say, matter of fact, I carry one with me and bring it out. You're going to use a cloth tape right there. In other words, you're going to take the path, the shortest path that a cord would take if it were plugged into that receptacle right here to measure from that receptacle to the basin right here. And as long as you were within 36 inches of that basin and within 12 inches of the countertop intended to serve here, we've got another receptacle right here for this basin. This is code compliant. Another one of those places in the code where people kind of get mixed up. The code tells me E3703.4, 210.11C3 in the National Electrical Code. The code tells me that I have to install at least one branch circuit rated at 20 amperes. So what does that mean? 12 gauge copper wire minimum for the bathroom receptacle outlets only. Now what that says at a minimum is that I could run one 20 amp circuit and catch receptacle outlets only for his side of the master bath, then go over and catch her side of the master bath, then leave there and go catch the bathroom receptacle outlet only in the hall bath, and then leave there and go upstairs and catch the kids' bathroom, and I would be code compliant. Now, what's the problem with that? 2 hair dryers, and you've probably exceeded the 20 amp circuit and gonna, trip a fuse, trip a circuit breaker. An exception to that rule says that I can run a 20 amp circuit to a bathroom, catch the receptacle outlet, and then catch switches and lights in that bathroom. Now, if I employ that exception, what I cannot do is leave this bathroom with that branch circuit. In other words, I couldn't catch this and then catch this and this and this and then try to jump over and catch the hall bath. Now, for some reason, this exception has kind of became the norm. And I can't tell you how many people I encounter that look at this and say, the code says I have to have a circuit per bathroom. And that's not what the code says. The code says I can employ a circuit per bathroom, but that's the exception, not the main rule. Okay. 2021 code simply tells us there was a addition added to say that for that 20 amp branch circuit, that is only for the receptacles that are required to be there by that requirement that says you have to have a receptacle within 36 inches of each basin. For the IRC, it's at E3901.26. For the NEC, it's that 210.11C3 requirement. In other words, and boy, I do not like this rule. I think this rule needs to be stricken from the code, but it is what it is. It's not Keith's code, it's the electrical code, right? What that means is if I can locate a receptacle in a bathroom that's not required to be there to serve a basin and not put it on the 20 amp circuit. For something like this right here. Now these receptacles right here that are required to be there to serve these basins, those are required to be on that 20 amp branch circuit. But this one I can put this on there if I choose to, but this one is not required to be on that 20 amp circuit. I could run a 15 amp circuit right here with 14 gauge wire if I chose to do that.
So I'm getting a lot of receptacles right next to toilets for the electric bidets.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's no code rule to prohibit that.
There's nothing. Do you think there
No.
might be something in the future? So nothing to look forward to.
Possibly. which is the next slide.
Oh, there I am. Sorry.
Yeah. Under the, well, I'll go to the next slide here. Under the 2017 NEC, 2018 IRC, the code simply tells us that you cannot locate a receptacle in a bathroom directly in or over a tub or shower space. And that's your only restriction. In other words, I cannot locate it, you know, in the space that occupies the tub or shower. Now, a receptacle right here, right next to the toilet, for the very popular electric bidet type things, there's no code rule prohibiting that. Now, it's located where? In a bathroom. So my GFCI rules would say it has to be GFCI protected. But as far as the location, there's nothing that would prohibit it from being in the vicinity of a toilet there. I just can't locate it directly in or over this tub or shower space. Now for the 2020 NEC 2021 IRC, a rule came in to say you can't locate it within 5 feet of the, within 3 feet of the tub or shower space. So 2017 NEC 2018 IRC, a receptacle right there would be code compliant as long as I didn't put it right there. I could put it right there, but not right there. 20 NEC 21 IRC, I cannot locate a receptacle in that yellow zone right there. So I'd have to locate it like right here or something. Now, I submitted a public comment to say, wait a minute, I've got a rule that tells me I have to have a receptacle within 36 inches of the outside of each basin. Now you're telling me I can't put a receptacle within 3 feet of a tub or shower space. What if I get into a bathroom to where I don't have 3 feet from the tub or shower space to the opposite wall? It's only 2 foot 10 inches. And that's very common. You see that a lot at dwelling units. So an exception was added to say, if you don't have the required space, in other words, you don't have 3 feet from the tub or shower space to the opposite wall, then you are permitted to locate your receptacle on the wall that is furthest away from the tub or shower space. And again, that's an exception right there. You're going to have 2 outdoor receptacle outlets at every dwelling unit, single family dwelling, or, you know, multifamily or 2-family dwelling, things like that. You're going to have at least 2 receptacle outlets located outdoors. The code says that I have to have at least 1 receptacle outlet, 1 located at the front and 1 located at the back. Code doesn't tell me what the front or back is. That's going to be up to the AHJ to determine what that is. If let's say we're looking at a top view here, but let's say that right here, I had a patio. That's where I do my grilling. That's where we congregate when we go outside. And let's say I had a receptacle located right there at that patio. But from that patio, I also had access to this backyard right here. In other words, I don't have a fence right there. Would you accept that receptacle right there as the required receptacle for the back? I would, I think. Don't we also have rules that say we have to have a receptacle located within 25 feet of each HVAC type equipment? So what if I had my condenser sitting right here, AC unit, and I had my required receptacle right beside it? Would that receptacle be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Yes. You could have 1 receptacle that could satisfy both of those code rules. Yes.
Severson and also the other.
one receptacle that would require the service receptacle for the air conditioner, and that same receptacle could also serve as the required receptacle for the back of the dwelling unit. Yes. And I'd have another one up here at the front porch. Now, if those receptacles are going to be located outdoors, chances are pretty great that the AHJ is going to determine that that's what, a wet location. So if they are in a wet location, which chances are pretty great they will be, then what do we have to have? We have to have a cover that provides weatherproof protection, whether or not a cord cap is plugged in or not. The in-use covers. And again, we've referred to those for years as a bubble cover. That's a slang term. Today, those covers right there have to be rated as extra duty to be code compliant.
What about the outlet itself? That's supposed to be listed WR, right?
Correct. Yeah, you would have to
I
have
don't
a
see any.
WR.
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't think that.
It's there, you just can't see it. How about that? I'll just put it that
All right. If you already saw it,
Can you say that
fine.
again?
Take your word
way.
for it.
No, I took that photograph about 5 years ago before that rule came into the code. So it probably is
Okay,
not.
doesn't
but,
apply then.
But it would need to be a weather resistant receptacle. Yes,
Okay,
you're correct.
thanks.
A lot of people, they don't like the bulkiness of the extra duty hood covers. In other words, they stick out from the wall too great, and you're always hitting your knee on them or something like that. Manufacturers have stepped up to the plate, and here's one by Arlington Industries that only extends from the wall less than half an inch. But it's still an in-use cover that provides weatherproof protection, whether or not a cord cap is plugged in or not. The receptacle itself is recessed in this case. So yes, that would be code compliant as well. And there's your WR designation. Is that a code requirement? Let's
Yes,
say
it
that.
is.
That is
Yes,
not
it
a
is.
code requirement. No. Is
No,
it
no,
a
that-
code? Is it a code requirement that the manufacturer put WR on it?
Oh, no, of
No,
course not. The
no,
actual
no.
receptacle gotta be listed.
The manufacturers are putting the WR on there as a convenience to you. Yes.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's
not a code
gotta come from it's gotta come from the manufacturer listing. The listing's gotta be on the receptacle itself.
Correct. But the WR indication is not required to be there.
No,
They're
of course not.
The manufacturers are just doing you a favor, me and you a favor by doing that.
Yeah.
TR for tamper resistant. They're not required to put TR on there, but they do.
Right, correct.
We have to have a receptacle at every balcony, deck, or porch. That hadn't always been in the code. But yeah, we would, in this particular illustration right here, we would need this receptacle right here to serve that deck or that balcony. We would need that receptacle to serve this deck or porch here, and that receptacle right there to serve the front porch. And at the same time, those can satisfy what? The requirement that I have a receptacle, one at the front, one at the back. I'm gonna need a receptacle up here somewhere and a receptacle right here to satisfy every balcony, deck, or porch requirement. Right here, next door, right here. Probably have a balcony in the back that I would need a receptacle at. Again, why are those rules in the code? What are we trying to prevent? Trying to prevent an extension cord run through a sliding glass door or through a window or something. That's what we're trying to prevent there. What if we had a balcony like this right here, and it was simply there for aesthetics? In other words, these doors do not open to the living quarters. It's just simply there for looks. Am I required to have a receptacle right here? No. Only if it is accessible from living quarters. Now, it doesn't matter what size that balcony is. If those doors are operable, then yes, I would need a receptacle out here somewhere. Again, what are we trying to prevent here? Come about October something, we're going to put some decorations out for Halloween, and then about December, the weekend after Thanksgiving, we're going to put what up? We're going to put Christmas lights up, and we're trying to prevent extension cords from having to be run out of these windows and stuff to, you know, for our Christmas lights and so on. That's what we're trying to prevent. If we have a receptacle, in other words, if this is operable doors and we have to have a receptacle there, the receptacle outlet is required to be accessible, not readily accessible, just accessible from the balcony, deck, or porch, where it's accessible from inside the dwelling unit. We used to have language that said that the receptacle had to be located in the footprint of this balcony. And as you can see right here, that would be difficult to achieve in some cases. So yes, I could put a receptacle right there. And as long as that receptacle was accessible from this balcony, it would be code compliant. Got to have at least one laundry circuit at a single family dwelling. Now there's provisions for a multifamily dwelling, you know, where if you have community laundry facilities, you don't have to have a laundry circuit in each unit, but a 1 and 2 family dwelling, you're looking at least one laundry circuit. Install the receptacle outlet, at least one receptacle outlet installed in the designated area for the laundry equipment. It's going to have to be rated. The branch circuit's going to have to be rated at 20 amperes. So again, minimum of 12 gauge copper. You can have no other outlets. Now that's a tricky rule right there, because what that actually means is you can have no other outlets outside of the laundry area. Okay. And we have to be located with our designated receptacle outlet for the laundry, has to be located within 6 feet of the intended laundry area. So I'm going to run a laundry circuit, 20 amp rated laundry circuit, and I can catch that receptacle right there, that receptacle right there. And if I chose to, I could come over and catch this receptacle right here and be code compliant. Now, what I can't do is catch this and this, and then come down here and try to catch a receptacle in the bedroom out here on that. I can't leave this laundry area with this laundry circuit. I can run other circuits if I choose to do that as well. If I have other equipment, if I have other equipment like a dryer, water heaters, things like that, I'm gonna have to have circuits in there for those appliances as well. The lighting in that laundry area cannot be on that laundry circuit. They would have to be on a general lighting circuit right here. And my required receptacle has to be located within 6 feet of the intended laundry area. And the best advice I can give there is just simply look for that washer box right there and make sure your receptacle is within 6 feet of that washer box, and you should be good to go. Basements, garages, and accessory buildings. The code calls for receptacles in these areas when you have power to these type of facilities. Am I required to have electricity to this accessory building? No.
Can you go back one slide real quick?
Okay. If I choose to install power to this accessory building, then I'm required to have at least one receptacle outlet out there. Go ahead. Is that the one you wanted me to go back to?
Yes, sir. That's the one I wanted to look at. I was just trying to
I'm
read the
gonna
overview of it.
I'm gonna cover all that in
Oh,
the
okay.
next couple
Thank
of
you.
slides. A detached garage is not required to have power, but if it does have power, then I'm gonna have to have, you know, a receptacle for each vehicle bay. Is the way the rules are written now. And we'll look at that here in just a second. I got to have at least one receptacle outlet in each basement if I have a basement. Now, I got to have at least for your garages, I have to have at least one 20 amp rated branch circuit for the receptacle outlets in the garage with no other outlets, with one exception. And that is if I have a outdoor receptacle in that vicinity or, you know, readily accessible, I'm allowed by exception to put that receptacle right there, an outdoor receptacle on this garage receptacle circuit. I'm not required to put it on there, but I can if I choose to employ that exception. Last code cycle, the 2014 NEC, 2015 IRC, we had some language come in here prior to those additions of the code, like the 11 code, the 012 IRC. We were required to have one receptacle in a garage, an attached garage or detached with power. One receptacle, that's all we had to have. If it was a 4-car garage, we were required to have one receptacle. Now, when we moved to the 2014 NEC, 2015 IRC, we had some language come in to say that we needed to have a receptacle, and this is a place where when you serve on a code making panel, you have to be careful about the code language that you choose to put in black and white in the code, and it needs to say what you intended it to say. And unfortunately, for the 2023 NEC, or excuse me, 2014 NEC, 2015 IRC, they chose the wrong words. It said what they were trying to do was get a receptacle. If you had a 3-car garage, they wanted 3 receptacles. 4-car garage, they wanted 4 receptacles. But the language they chose is you needed at least one receptacle outlet for FOR each car space. And so my 2 dogs would take that language and literally say I could put a receptacle right here, and it could be for that car space and that car space. And so they didn't reach the intent that they were trying to achieve. So for the, well, that's not the one I was looking for. Here it is. So for the 2017 NEC, 2018 IRC, they changed the wording. And matter of fact, it was my public input that got this changed. Say what you want the code to say. And don't say for each car space, say in each, and don't say car space, because guess what? Especially in Texas, we park things other than cars in here. And so I can just see an old redneck Texan say, well, I parked the truck in there. So if you say car space, he's going to say, I don't need a receptacle there. So rather than say car space, let's say in each vehicle bay. And now I don't care what you park in there. It would need a receptacle per each vehicle bay. The whole reason these rules were written back in the 14 code, they were trying to get away from extension cords being strung across the garage floor, particularly for stuff like charging of electric vehicles and things like that. So if that was your intent, then these receptacles up in the ceiling for the garage door openers are in that vehicle bay. So we have to eliminate those. So let's say you need a receptacle in each vehicle bay, and those receptacles, in order for them to serve as the receptacles we're talking about, they can't be more than 5.5 feet above the floor. Now, where did I get that language from in my public input that got this change? If you go back to that requirement that we looked at a while ago, remember that rule that said no point any further than 6 feet from a receptacle for your wall spacing requirements? If you read a little further there, it says, and in order for those receptacles to serve as that wall spacing, they can't be greater than 5.5 feet above the floor. So that's where I got that language from to put right here. So 2011 NEC, 2012 IRC, one receptacle somewhere in this garage. 2014 NEC, 2015 IRC, I propose I could put one receptacle right here and one receptacle right there, and that receptacle could be for that car space and that car space. So I'm up to 2 receptacles. 2017 NEC, 2018 IRC, I need a receptacle in each vehicle bay, and the receptacles can't be any greater than 5.5 feet above the floor. So for this code cycle, I think you're looking at a minimum of 3 receptacles to make that code compliant for that 3-car garage. Hallway receptacles, I need a receptacle in a hallway when that hallway reaches a length of 10 feet or greater. Now, again, a lot of people will look at this code rule and say, oh, the code says I have to have a receptacle for every 10 feet of a hallway. And that's not what the code says. It just simply says that once that hallway reaches a length of 10 feet or greater, you need a receptacle to serve that hallway. You're going to take your measurement in the center of that hallway, and as long as you don't encounter a fixed wall, then that would be considered one hallway. Even if I had a door right here that could open, that would still be considered one hallway right there. And that receptacle would be needed either here or down here or somewhere to satisfy at least one receptacle in each hallway. Foyers, for the longest time, we didn't have rules in the code. This has only been in the code for a couple of code cycles. And wow, what's a foyer? Is it a hallway? No, it's not really a hallway. It kind of looks like a hallway, but it's not a hallway. Is it living quarters? Is it like a bedroom or something? No, it's not really that either. So we needed some rules for receptacles in foyers. And so what we have in the code now, the key right here is that 60 square feet. You got to have a foyer with a minimum of 60 square feet. In other words, what? 6 by 10 before these rules kick in. If you have your 60 square feet or greater than 60 square feet here, now every wall that is 3 feet or wider would call for a receptacle on that hallway. Now, don't get this confused with your wall space requirements for your living wall space. Like we talked about a while ago, no point any further than 6 feet, and every wall that's 2 feet or wider. None of that applies right here. Your foyers have their own separate rules right here. So looks like I have 1, three walls in this foyer. This one's 12 feet long. This one's 8 feet long, and this one's 2 feet long. So per code, if any wall 2 feet or wider, so I'm gonna need a receptacle right here and a receptacle right here to be code compliant. I don't need one right here because that's not 3 feet in width. Okay. Interesting photo right here of a foyer. Now, would you find this in a tract home? I doubt it. This is a pretty high-end dwelling unit right here, but let's apply that rule we just got through looking at to this foyer. So what does it tell us? Any wall that's 3 feet or wider, I have to have a receptacle, right? So look right here. Whoop. Is that 3 feet or wider? Yes. So I'm gonna need a receptacle right here. That right there was about 3 foot 8 inches from right there to the end of that column right there. So a receptacle would be required right here. That right there measured about 4 feet right there. So a receptacle would be required right here. And this right over here measured about 3.5 feet. So to make this code compliant, you would need 4 receptacles in this particular foyer right here. Let's take us a break. Let's take a 10-minute break, and I'll see you guys in about 10 minutes. Okay, I'll put up a timer again for us. Okay, welcome back. I think what we're going to try to do is for the next hour or so, I want to go through our GFCI and AFCI requirements for dwelling units, and I'll try to kind of hurry through these as much as I can because we have another person here at IEI that's monitoring your chat, your code questions and all, or your questions, and we've had quite a few, or not quite a few, but 3 or 4 questions around grounding and bonding. And so